This next hand is against an aggro maniac on PokerStars. My reads are that he'd been floating a lot, bluffing a lot, being very, very aggressive, 3-betting a lot pre-flop. So here he min-raises pre-flop. I flat with ace-9 off. Flop comes 7-7-2. I've got backdoor nut hearts and ace heart. Usually I should just be check calling here, especially against a very tricky, aggressive player. I don't want to get in too many tough spots in big pots out of position with a marginal hand on a paired board. But sometimes I just can't help myself, and I like to try and outmaneuver my opponent. So here I check raise. I don't like my sizing. I think it should be a little bit smaller. I think the idea behind my size here was to stop him from floating, because I knew he's just going to float almost everything here. He's not going to give me much credibility for the 7. So that's probably why I made it a little bit bigger. So he calls, as I expect him to do. The turn, I bet 300 into 440. I expect him to give up a little bit, but if he is floating, he can sometimes re-bluff me. And obviously, if he has a 7, I think he's going to just continue to trap, expecting me to be bluffing a lot, and he just probably would want me to try and triple barrel so he can get it in on the river. But he min-raises on the turn, and this doesn't make much sense to me. I don't see any hand at all in his entire range of hands that would min-raise the turn for value. If he has a 7, I think he would just call and hope that I bluff river, or if I check he can just value bet the river. If he has a jack, his min-raise is over-representing his hand, because he again would call just to induce all my bluffs to continue. Obviously, if I have a 7, he's just getting in bad shape with min-raising a jack, so I doubt he has that there. So here, when things don't make sense, it just seems to me that it's almost always a bluff. So with the amount of money in the pot and my ace high likely being the best hand, I just decided to jam it in. Not a very conventional play, and not one that I'd make very often, but based on this very bizarre min-raise on the turn, I expected him just to have a float in his range a large percentage of the time. So I jam it in, and he folds, bizarrely, half of his stack. This next hand is against a very weak, very bluffy opponent on full tilt. He has played quite high stakes too, so he does think on some level, but he's quite passive post-flop and then very bluffy and makes takes bizarre lines post-flop. So he limps in, and I check back with Queen 4 off. On this board, I expect him to raise all his aces pre-flop, so I don't think he has many aces in his range when he bets this flop. So I decide to check raise bluff just to take it down now, and I mean, if he does have a weaker hand like a jack or a 5, I can bluff on later streets and get him to fold that. Plus, I can have aces in my hand because I don't always attack every single limp with all the aces in my range, and he may or may not know that, I'm not sure. So I do check raise because I do have some credibility, and he doesn't necessarily have an ace in his range. And he re-raises again just over the minimum to double my raise. Now, given he limped in, he's representing a very narrow range here again. Probably the only conceivable hand is jack 5. So of all the combinations of hands he can have, he's representing a tiny range of value hands and then just a whole bunch of air. And even the jack 5, I expect him to sometimes just flat because I'm not representing much of a strong hand myself. So his re-raise is just going to blast me off either my bluffs or my weak check raise hands. I suppose he could expect me to sometimes have an ace and continue, but I think that he would think that I was bluffing a bit here, so he might be trapping with his jack 5 sort of hands. So given the likelihood is that he is bluffing here a large percent and the amount of chips in the pot, I mean the amount of chips I have back aren't that many. So the only real, I could click it back again, but I think the best move here is just jam. So I jam it in and he folds, so we were right on our assumption that it's just such a tiny value range of his re-raising hands that there's enough bluffs in his range that it's profitable for us just to take it down there.